I'm going to start with a disclaimer. Nothing in this video is actually for sale. This is only a proof of concept. There's only one of these in existence, so please don't DM me asking to buy it or to make you one. On the other hand, please do leave comments to let me know what you think. I'm going to start this video with a little bit of a rant. Like many, I enjoyed building Heathkits back in the 1970s and 1980s. I built lots of test equipment, and for the most part, it still works fine. I never built the color TV, such as the one you see here, but many people did, and this would have been a multi-day, if not multi-week affair. But at the end of the day, they would learn a lot about electronics, and especially learn a lot about what's now vintage color TVs and how they work, and especially how to fix them. It's clear, though, that there's still demand out there for the experience of building an original 20th century Heathkit. Of course, there is the current, what I'll call 21st century Heathkit.com, which offers a number of interesting products. This is in fact their GC-1006 clock. I think it's one of their more interesting kits. Nevertheless, perhaps out of nostalgia, there are many people out there who enjoy or would enjoy building vintage or 20th century Heathkits the way they were originally presented in, again, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Here's an example of such a kit. This is my vintage Heathkit GC-1005 clocks. The bottom one of these has been in my possession since 1972 when I built it, and has been running continuously for, well, a little over 50 years. And sure, I've had to turn it off occasionally, for example, moving to a new home, or for a power outage, or even once I had to recap it. The top one was an eBay find from a few years ago, which I got not working or for parts. It actually worked fine, and I use it for spare parts. All it really needed was a recap. So, can you still buy vintage 20th century Heathkits in kit form? Yes, you can. Typically on eBay or other sites, you'll find so-called unbuilt Heathkits, but I typically find these to be rather overpriced. Interestingly, the more these are tube-based as opposed to solid state, and the more they have to do with audio, such as audio amplifiers, the more egregious the pricing. Go figure. And of course, once you've acquired your vintage unbuilt Heathkit, and you've hopefully checked it for parts to make sure nothing's missing, you'll find that you're not yet ready to build a kit because you're going to want to replace quite a few things and clean up some things. For example, at the very least, most of the electrolytic capacitors in the kit will have to be replaced with modern equivalents because they'll have either gone shorted or open or electrically leaky. You'll also want to have a good look at all the carbon composition resistors, because many of them will have significantly drifted, usually up in value and usually out of spec over 50 years. And then there's more insidious issues, for example, connectors and wafer switches and just lugs in general that have severely tarnished or oxidized. You're going to have to clean each one of those individually. You can argue this adds to the fun, but it's something you're absolutely going to have to do before you can even start to build your new unbuilt Heathkit. I think it's unnecessary, and so I've come up with a new concept, which I call the Heathkit rekit. The idea of a Heathkit rekit is not a rebuild or a restoration. Rather, it's the idea of taking an existing built Heathkit, whether working or not, and usually not working is preferable, and tearing it down, doing a teardown of it down to as its individual component parts to the greatest extent possible, and then repackaging it as if it were an original Heathkit. Of course, when you're creating the Heathkit rekit, you're going to have to substitute all those expired parts, the dead electrolytic capacitors, the out of tolerance resistors, Hopefully, nothing unobtainium is missing, but for the most part, all of the passive parts and semiconductors are pretty much available. As you can see, I've chosen to package this Heathkit rekit in a USPS priority mail box. Speaking of Heathkit original packaging and boxes with original Heathkit logos, I couldn't help but notice this listing. Yes, it's for an empty original Heathkit cardboard box. Empty. So if you really want to rekit your kit into an original Heathkit box, I suppose you can find one. Just for the record, these Heathkit rekits, as I'm calling them, are not for sale anywhere. These are simply proof of concepts. You can't don't mail me asking to buy it. There's only one of these, and I'm certainly not going to get into the rekit business. But I thought it would make an interesting proof of concept. By now, you probably guessed that I chose the Heathkit IP18 as the subject for this rekit proof of concept exercise. I chose this kit because it's relatively inexpensive. There's relatively few numbers of parts, for example, compared to the color TV kit I showed you earlier, which would be kind of challenging to rekit. So without further ado, let's make believe we're sending away for our Heathkit rekit of an IP18. So, imagine our rekit just showed up in the mail. Let's tear into it. Here we go. All right, let's see what we got. Well, first and foremost, of course, we have the official Kit Builder's Guide from 1970s vintage. And this tells you how to organize your parts when you're checking them off the parts list. Old-timers will recognize this graphic from an older version of the Kit Builder's Guide. What I found amusing once when I actually tried this a long time ago was what happens when you try to do this with a little tiny diode and it falls inside the corrugations and you have to spend an hour tearing the cardboard apart to recover it. Apart from that, see that big electrolytic? What can you tell about that electrolytic just from this illustration? Then you might want to make sure you have all the necessary kit building tools you'd ever want, including perhaps your original Heathkit soldering iron. Don't know how to read resistor color codes? This will teach you, as well as identifying most other components. Finally, if you want to make a solid mechanical connection whenever you're building and attaching a component to a lug before you solder. And you also want to make sure that your parts are straight onto the PC board and look kind of tidy when you're doing point-to-point. By the way, none of this surface mount rubbish. Soldering, nice bright connection. How to identify a cold solder joint. Clip off the excess leads. And even how to mount ICs onto a PC board. Wow, that's advanced. Check off each step as you do it, and soon enough, you're ready to try your new Heathkit, or call Heathkit for technical help, or heaven forbid, have to send it in for repair. And that's it. So that's the Kit Builder's Guide. And it's generic to every Heathkit, so there's nothing specific about this particular kit. But what is, of course, is the legendary assembly manual. Here's the original manual for the IP18 regulated power supply. I won't go through this in any detail because you probably have seen Heathkit manuals and how good they are. And including, of course, at the end, the all-important theory of operation and schematic, photograph, and so forth. All right, put that aside. Let's see what we have inside here. Wow. Well, remove the cardboard separator. Heathkit loved to use cardboard. And in our vintage paper bags, also known as lunch bags, we have a number of parts, which in this case are hand labeled, because I don't have a rubber stamp. So parts 1, parts 2, miscellaneous hardware. Put those aside. We'll open one of those up in a second. Here's our transformer as it would have shown up in bubble wrap. Of course, the all-important PC board, ready to be stuffed with parts and soldered up. Original Heathkit 3-wire line cord. And finally, our chassis. And the chassis, of course, comes wrapped in craft paper to protect it from scratches. So we'll open that up too. We can unwrap it without tearing too much stuff. Here we go. Here's the bottom half of the chassis. And I'm unwrapping here. Here's the, of course, the top half of the case. So I'll just put them like this for now. And if we just open up some of these parts, we'll find that, of course, all the parts are wrapped in coin envelopes, because that's what Heathkit did. And of course, these would usually be labeled with rubber stamps and part numbers of their own. But I didn't have that luxury, so as you'll see later, I simply organized it by how the parts list organizes the parts. So, as another YouTuber might say, let's get this out onto a tray. But no, we'll just get it out and have a look in detail. So here's everything out of the box and laid out. One thing that I wondered what to do is what parts to put into what little coin envelope. And I chose to basically organize each envelope by the portion of the parts list. So in the parts list, it calls out all the resistors. Then there's another paragraph which calls out all the capacitors and so forth. And so the coin envelopes I labeled here match the parts list subheadings exactly. So that makes it easy to check off the components against the part list. You simply open one envelope at a time, count the resistors, make sure they're all there for that part of the parts list, and go on to the next part of the parts list. The original Heathkit did not always do that. In fact, they usually didn't. They organized parts into envelopes, not necessarily in the order based on the parts list, but sometimes based on the order in which you would need to assemble those parts in the instructions. So if you had a subsection of the kit, those parts might come in their own envelope, even though they're a mix of resistors, capacitors, and so forth. And sometimes the envelopes were labeled in such a way with part numbers such that I suspect what they wanted to do was to be able to reuse that whole envelope with a subpart number or in some other kit. So if many of their kits had common sets of parts that would repeat in every kit, they could put that in its own envelope and reuse that completely stuffed envelope and pack it with other kits. So nevertheless, I chose to package them and label them exactly as the parts list in this kit labels them. And of course, it's obviously I hand lettered the envelopes. Original Heathkit would use some what appeared to be rubber stamps with text to label each envelope. So here's the I guess beauty shot of every component in the Heathkit IP18 kit, essentially as Heathkit would have delivered it. Now, obviously, I've substituted parts that need to be, and I'll have a closer pan over with a voiceover to show you that. So starting at the top left, we of course have the chassis, the power transformer. This is the original Heathkit line cord, which is in good shape. Just under it is its new strain relief, new rubber feet. Of course, the printed circuit board, which is original but cleaned up. All new electrolytic capacitors, 5 of them. Almost all new resistors. The bottom 2 resistors there, the two 2-watters, are original because I didn't want to buy new ones. They're odd values. The 2 potentiometers, that little terminal strip in the back, all the number 6 hardware and the number 8 hardware that's called for in the kit, the lens for the power supply, the power switch, control knob stuff, transistor sockets, the semiconductors, all the transistors and diodes, the knobs, the all-important Heathkit nut starting tool, that red thing, some hookup wire, some original 1970s lead-based ceramic core solder, the binding post and their hardware. Here are the semiconductors and transistors and diodes. They're all new, and 3 of them are, of course, as you can see, NTE parts, which I substituted because some of the originals are a little bit hard to find. So now, and I've tested all these semiconductors in an actual running IP18, and they all work. They all work perfectly fine. In addition, right in the middle of this picture, you'll see the number 6 and number 8 hardware that I replaced. Heathkit zinc-plated hardware didn't age well over 50 years. Typically, the screw heads would corrode and look awful. So as I do with the stuff I restore for my own use, I replaced all of the number 6 and number 8 hardware with brand new stainless steel, beautiful shiny Phillips head hardware. On the bottom left, extreme left, you'll see that TO3 pass transistor. Just below it, that would normally be a mica insulator that Heathkit would have supplied. I replaced that with a modern silicone heat pad that's designed for that purpose. Finally, I'll mention there's one piece of hardware here that I'm not showing because it would be difficult to show because of the way it is used, and I'll leave that as a hint. It has to do with the controls on this power supply as another hint. If you can identify that one piece of missing hardware type, do leave it in the comments, and if you're correct, I'll give you a shout out. In any case, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video.